Hello everybody, welcome to the Neil's Homestead. I'm Jeanette. Today we're going to talk about the thief in your garden. I don't know if you've guessed it by now, but that thief that I'm talking about is weeds. A serious garden, one where you're going to provide your own food for your family, is a lot of work. And the biggest responsibility that we have in taking care of that garden, the hardest one, is keeping the weeds out. Weeds are generally high consumers of the nutrients in the soil. And whenever you let them grow, they are only robbing your plants of those nutrients, and they're also robbing them of the water that's in the soil. So you need to do all you can do to keep them at bay. Every spring, or maybe I should go back to every end of the last year's season, I tell myself, next year I'm going to do it all perfect. Next year I'm going to keep the weeds out of my garden. Next thing you know, there's a little green cast to the soil down around the plants, and you think, well, it's no big deal, I can deal with that. You turn your back on it, you get busy with something else, and you look back, and those weeds are several inches tall, and they've already robbed a lot from your garden plants. If you take care of weeds right from the beginning, when they're a tiny little thing, that's the easiest time to get your weeds under control. And so today I'm going to show you a few ways that I do it to keep the weeds under control, and hopefully it'll help you out a little bit. Perhaps I should define weed to start off with. To me, a weed is any kind of plant that is growing in a place that I don't want it to grow. Now, there are good weeds and there are bad weeds. There are weeds that we can eat, and there are poisonous weeds that we definitely don't want to eat. We definitely don't even want to touch. For the purpose of this video, I'm just going to tell you that a weed is a plant that's growing where I don't want it to grow. There are perennial weeds and there are annual weeds. Perennial weeds stay alive over a long period of time and come back year after year if you live in a cold climate. Annual weeds generally have to be started by seeds. The plant would grow over the summer season, make seeds, the seeds would fall to the ground, and then the next year those seeds would germinate and grow a new plant. Year-to-year weed control, annual plants are easier to get rid of than perennial plants because the perennial plant generally grows from the roots, and it's harder to get the roots out than it is to just cut the plant off. Some examples of common annual weeds that grow in my area are this ragweed plant, lamb's quarter, of which I have a large patch right here on the edge of my greenhouse, and giant ragweed. These are the most common annual weeds that we deal with on our property and in our area. There are plenty more, and I don't even know the names of all of them. When it's small and young, you can take a little grass plant like that and just pull it right out. But if you leave it in there very long, it develops a very strong root system that you can't hardly even pull out. Our biggest perennial weed enemies are the dock plant and the grasses. The type of hoe that I prefer is called a stirrup hoe, and obviously it's because it resembles the stirrup on a saddle. It's got blades on either side here, and the way you do this hoe is you scuffle it back and forth. Now you need to keep these blades kind of sharp because they're actually cut the weeds off and cutting through the soil. It's not just jabbing and stirring, but it's actually cutting. Another kind of hoe that's very useful and somewhat common is this three-sided hoe, and it has a pretty good point on the end. This is really handy for making a trench for planting seeds out in your garden, but it's also good for hoeing weeds and getting up close to a plant. These two hoes are fairly common, this one probably being the most common. A long time ago, this was my favorite hoe. It has a short broken off handle now, but I lost it somewhere along the way a long time ago. They used to call this an onion hoe. It's smaller and it's rounded on the edges more. And I like the smallness of it because I could get it in around the plants better. Now that I found it and the handle is shorter, I think it could come in handy as a short-handled hoe in places where I don't want a long-handled hoe. There are plenty of other types of hoes and ground working tools. There is one kind that I would like to get. It's kind of wide and narrow from front to back. I'll see if I can find a picture of it to show it to you. It's a little bit expensive and I've wanted to buy it for a few years, but I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. Often there's no choice but just to get down and pull weeds along small plants like my beets. It has a lot of lamb's quarter growing in there, and I want to get them out before they get too big. But it's kind of damp right here, and my scuffle hoe can't get up quite as close to the plants as I need to get. This greenhouse has an awful lot of volunteer tomato plants, which tomatoes aren't weeds, but if a weed is a plant that's growing where you didn't plant it and you don't want it, then it becomes a weed. So sad as it is and hard as it is, I'll pull those tomato plants up and have to get rid of them. This, along the edge of the greenhouse, is a giant dock plant. I should have had it pulled out before now, but I didn't. They have a root that is a tap root that goes straight down, and it anchors very well, and the soil has to be very moist and loose in order to get that pulled out. So I'm going to try and see what happens, but I don't think I'll be able to. Nope, I'm not going to get that out. I'll just have to take a hoe, sharp hoe or something, and cut that off for now, but it will grow back. Using mulches such as wood chips, hay, straw, leaves, anything you can find like that, even cardboard or newspapers, is a great way to control the weeds, but it's not 100% because the weeds will grow in it and up through it too. Black plastic mulch, like you see where we're growing our onions, and woven black ground cover are great ways to control the weeds. And that is the primary reason why we use the black plastic mulch, along with the fact that we put our drip tape underneath and it holds the moisture in there and we use less water. There is the problem, however, of weeds growing in between the rows. We still have to control them. For that we have the tiller. We run the tiller down and back, and it usually takes care of the weeds. Might have to do it a couple times a year.